So we got the Blitz. What was Hitler's fatal mistake number one? What little tiny harbor city in France did he not take? Yeah, Dunkirk. Who was Prime Minister of Britain? Took over, ironically, in the same day that Germany attacked France? Yeah, Churchill. And what was his big decision? He did what? Say it again. Yeah, he stayed in the war, got the troops out. If he would have lost some troops, they talked about suing for peace. The other guy who nearly became prime minister, this guy named Lord Halifax. He became the British ambassador to the United States. He was actually pro-Nazi. In fact, the former king of England was pro-Nazi. King over DA. He had to give up the crown because he married a woman who was divorced without a no for monarch. So there is a lot of fascist feeling around. This has notes all over it too. Whatever. Okay. And who signed a non-aggression pact in August 1939, shocking everybody? Hitler, Stalin, Soviets, and the Germans. And what was the agreement in Germany that became synonymous with appeasement? Munich. And where we at here? Okay, so let's get going. We got the Blitz. So we got right to here, right? Yeah, and the Nazis, Hitler, really thought this would force them to surrender. That was the whole doctrine of total war. And it did not work at all. I think I mentioned Hamburg are free, didn't I? And so it didn't work. And Churchill became a hero. He would become a hero. And he would remain as prime minister until July of 1945. And then be elected, then come back as prime minister one more time, 1953. So, but the U.S. are going to try it. U.S. is going to try the same thing with total war. The British are going to try it, and it's going to be tried in World War II, and it'll be tried time after time after time. Have people finally realized that you keep trying the same thing over and over again, it doesn't work? Maybe it's time to quit, or AKA insanity. Do you think they'll ever learn? This time. This time will work. Always. You can go all the way from Russia and Ukraine to the United States and Iran, etc. So, since we're in Britain, I had no other way to show this. I had to show you a little sign, a little place called Clinton, I'm sorry, outside of London, and it has one of the most amazing signs I've ever seen in my life. The play area / cholera burial ground. That's when I think of fun for children, I think cholera burial ground. Has nothing else to do with the war, but we're in Britain, so I figured I'd show you. Are you excited by this? You want to go to the cholera burial ground? So let's get to fatal mistake number 3. With Britain still in the war, despite his fear of a two-front war, Hitler decided the best thing to do was invade the Soviet Union, the largest country in the world. And here's talking about them taking areas where there are German populations. So why? Well, of course, we mentioned Lebensraum, hatred of communism, but also oil. Hitler hated the fact that he was beholden to Nazi Germany for oil and wanted to take it. And where was the oil? Here. Still there. Biggest oil reserves for the Soviet Union, and then Russia today, right there. So they knew somebody was going to stab the other in the back, and here is Hitler stabbing Stalin in the back. Kind of a clever cartoon. Now they called, so Britain's still fighting, and Germany hasn't fully mobilized, but everybody thought the Soviet Union would collapse after Stalin's brutal rule, and there was also a lot of wishful thinking, just assuming he's strongman and all the people of the Soviet Union want a totally different form of government. They thought that it wouldn't last. And then you can imagine how confident the Germans were after defeating the French. And no one thought the French would be beaten. So 6 weeks are what they assumed. Punch through, cause hellacious casualties, Soviets quit. That's what they thought. They named this operation after one of the most famous emperors Barbarossa the Great of the Holy Roman Empire. I'll explain Barbarossa in just one second. The problem is the Soviet Union is huge. And so even though for a short time the Germans and their allies, Romania and Hungary, had a slight numerical advantage, they had to attack over vast areas. The thought was Leningrad, the former St. Petersburg, and it's St. Petersburg now, the capital city, Moscow, which became capital during the Civil War, and Ukraine. That is where there are resources and a route to the oil. Same reason Russia attacked Ukraine now. And that was the plan. The problem is they don't really have enough men. Still, 90% of the transport for the Germans horse drawn. Most of their men are walking. They don't have motor transport. And one more big thing, all the oil they got for the war in the West, they traded the Soviets for. This might shock you. But if Germany attacks the Soviet Union is going to probably go trading them oil. I figured that one out myself. And so they're going to be without oil. They're going to use up their reserves fast. And then where do they get oil if they don't take it? I think you might see what's going to help cause the downfall of the Soviets. The Germans. Oh, one more thing. Barbarossa, this is a bad omen. So one thing about Nazism, fascism, go back to when Germany was great. So when was it? The Holy Roman Empire, the first empire. Oh, have you ever heard something called the Third Reich? The First Reich, Holy Roman Empire. The second, that first German empire that was created in 1871, the one that fought in World War I, the third was going to be him. Nazis. Come back to this. Barbarossa, even though he was considered the Great, was going to be part of the Third Crusade. And when he was going crusade down to the Holy Land, we're talking 13th century here. Here. And as he's leading his forces here through modern day Turkey, he fell off his horse in full armor. They're worried about a surprise attack. That's all what culture is today. In armor, and fell off into a little stream that was less than a knee high. But his armor filled up with water, and they couldn't get him out, and he drowned. Armed and water up the knee high. That's what we call a bad omen for the German attack on the Soviet Union. Yes, that's how Barbarossa the Great died. So, two more things. They attacked on this day because, unlike France, all the roads are still dirt. They got to wait for the spring rains to dry up. And that's the longest day of the year. The problem is we're already through July. How many of you know this, but that's a deep hole. Just so you know, here's the latitude of Helena. Are you ready? Can you see how much further north it is than Helena? It's kind of shocking if you look at it that way. But they really thought it'd be 6 months, or 6 weeks, I'm sorry. No later in September. They're doing their parade in front of the Kremlin. That's sincerely what they believe. So, the Soviets were taken completely by surprise. Stalin just couldn't imagine that the Germans would attack. He knew it's going to happen sometime, and he's thinking, I'm not to attack them first. But his army wasn't ready because of his purges. He never dreamt that Germany would attack with Britain still in the front. And even when spies came and told him, he was told by Soviet intelligence, he refused to believe it. I should have added in very Stalinist fashion. Anybody want to guess what happened to most of the spies who knew that Stalin ignored the warnings? Anybody want to guess? In the dark humor of the Soviet Union, they got the 9mm headache. Executed. Because he didn't want people to know. Even with remember I told you about the Enigma machine? The British warned him and he refused to believe. And so they're taken totally by surprise. Most of the Soviet Air Force in the West was knocked out on the ground. And the Germans had overall better planes, but the Soviets were starting to make some very good planes. And Soviet troops, brave, but most of them were not very well equipped, hastily put in the army. Thousands would surrender. The breakthrough was overwhelming. Within just a week and a half, the Germans had advanced 500 miles and taken hundreds of thousands of prisoners. Everybody just assumed it's over. The Soviets won't last at all. Here are German armored columns advancing a little bit south towards the Ukraine. German dive bombers could go anywhere they wanted. That's a German grenade. The Americans called a potato masher. And to give you an idea of the size of the area that was taken in the very beginning of the war. So, Moscow's back here, but here's the amount that was taken in the first month and a half. Or I'm sorry, first 3.5 months. And right here at Minsk, for example, 500,000 Soviet troops were swelling. At Smolensk, over 600. At Kiev, over almost 900,000, even though a few 100,000 were able to escape through the gaps in the German line. To give you an idea of the size of the area they took, I thought this map maker did a good job. They superimposed it over the Midwest of the US. Look how big of an area that is. It's vast. And that was just in a few months of combat. And so people looking at the outside thinking it's over. But German generals by August were, this isn't going the way we thought. They've lost hundreds of thousands of men, and there's still more. And they're fighting with incredible courage. And even though their tactics were behind, they're learning fast. And they have some good equipment. They're not collapsing. It wasn't going the way they thought. So as they continue to advance and inflicting more casualties, here they're advancing. By the way, they started putting the flags on the roof to tell German planes that they're German tanks. Serious problems. Most importantly, every mile they went, they outran their supply lines. And when the Soviets retreated, they destroyed, under Stalin's order, everything of value. This is called scorched earth. So here that a bridge is destroyed, so they make a pontoon bridge. And here's a Soviet farm that was destroyed, so the Germans couldn't take the food. Yes, the hardship of the Soviet people is going to be beyond comprehension. Beyond comprehension. And casualties were much higher than they thought they were. Now, the Soviet rail network was not as extensive as the German one. But going back to the Russian Empire, the Soviet gauge, the gap between the rails, was not the same rail gauge as the rest of Europe. So they couldn't use engines from Germany on Soviet trains. And the Soviets rip up the track and destroy the engines. They couldn't use it until they rebuilt new rail. And so everything had to be brought up by truck. The bad Soviet roads just shoot up the trucks. And by the end of August, just to get gas to the front German soldiers, frontline soldiers, it was taking 3 gallons of gasoline to drive 1 gallon of gasoline that's usable at the front. You can't win that way. And there's no room, therefore, for not much room for ammunition. And winter gear, no room at all. They're going to roll the die and still hope they can win. They're getting really nervous and beginning to change the entire justification for the war that August. Now, outside observers, Soviets are near collapse. It's collapsing longer than we thought. But by the end of August, they captured all these troops at Smolensk, but Moscow's still there. And the fall is coming. When the fall hits, the heavy rains hit and stops mobility. And that is going to lead to the last death. I know I have to do an incredibly fast version of this. I'm like skipping parts, a lot of parts. The last desperate attempt to take Moscow would be that fall, but most importantly into the winter. Now, when the fall rains hit, the roads turn to mud. There's stories of German horses drowning to death in the mud. They're trying to corduroy the roads to go over it. But then when it started getting cold, it froze. It was the last gasp. German tanks, a reconnaissance unit, got within sight of the Kremlin. Got that close. They could see the Kremlin. So they're just on the outskirts of Moscow, and that's as close as they found. Then winter hit, Soviet defenses held so great. But soon, by the end of November, it's 20 and 30 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. German engines froze up. German draft horses they were using, they weren't ready for this kind of cold. Thousands would freeze to death. The small Russian ponies worked much better. Germans didn't have ones. And everything just stopped. Here are German soldiers. They didn't have winter gear, so they huddled up or used whatever they could. There's stories of them using drapes and things they stole from Russian homes. With stealing food from Russians, you can see them advancing into the fog. It just stopped. They stopped. And then Siberian reinforcements arrived. Russians had troops in Siberia here because of the Japanese threat. Remember, Japan had joined, what do we call the Germans, the Italians, and the Japanese together? Yeah, the Axis. German or Soviet spies learned from Tokyo that Japan was not going to attack you. They're going to attack someplace else. And so they could pull their troops out of here. They had signed a non-aggression pact with Japan too, and that would last till 1945. Gee, I wonder where Japan's going to attack. They're going to get their oil someplace else. So back to this. Those reinforcements now with good winter gear and ski soldiers work really well, 30 degrees below zero. They counterattacked. And the Battle of Moscow, the Soviet counterattack stopped and they even pushed the Germans back a little bit. This is the first turning point of the war. Maybe one of the most important battles in history. This ranks right up there with Tannenberg and the Marne. It was that big of a deal. Because the Germans, nobody thought the Germans could be beaten. But the Soviets stopped them. Now, they took a whole heck of a lot of land. And the Soviets also are proving one very important thing. German tanks were used better, but they could not match up against Soviet tanks. And they were learning. That's called the T-34. It was trying to be overall the best tank of the war. A Soviet design. Had some flaws, but good tank when used right. And this was a shock. The Germans kept it secret from the German people. But back in Hitler's headquarters, called the Wolf's Lair, they knew we were in trouble. Everything had changed. So that's how much land Germany was under their control. So their Hungarian, Romanian, and Bulgarian ally, Germany had conquered this. All that's as far as they got. Crimea, they wouldn't take till May of 42, but I'm not sure not that much. And everything's going to change. The realization hit that this is not going to be a short war. And the name the Germans would start using for this war will change to a war of annihilation. And the cruelty of this war is indescribable. Remember all those prisoners that the Germans took, I mentioned? Half would be purposely starved to death by the Germans. And then, of course, you can imagine what the Soviets would do to the Germans. It's different in the West. And there's no quick victory. And so now a horrible war of attrition. And this shows scorched earth going both ways. Germans advancing by a farm that retreated Russians had destroyed. And Germans retreating, destroying behind them. That's the new. That's the beginning of the final solution. Largest population of Jews in the world is in Poland and that area of the Soviet Union. All began with the realization of they're being pushed out of the shop. So the war would get horrible. I should add, in Russia, the Soviet Union, this is called the Great Patriotic War. Great Patriotic War. So what about German occupation? Now it's going to be a long-time occupation in the middle of war. And one of the most amazing things, but also shows you absolute Nazi incompetence, they did not start fully mobilizing for war until 1942. In fact, there are still many German households that had household servants at a time when they needed every person for the war, especially Nazis. who kept them for the whole war, high level nonsense. But now their plan is to strip this Kiev, to strip areas they had conquered from as much as they can to win the war. And even when they mobilized, it was not near as efficient as what they did in the Soviet Union, Britain, or the United States. Not even close. It's amazing how incompetent they were. And we're not even to the level of incompetence in total war that's going to come. They had a name for the plan. It's called in the Green Book, but it's going to be dubbed the Hunger Plan. And the Hunger Plan is, what do we do with the area that we conquered? Squeeze resources and starve to death the people who live there. Work them and starve them to death. And this too is in Kiev. But here shows the amount of rations and calories. And so supposedly 100% of rations would go to Germans, even though it was only 94% of the calories they needed. So we Germans had to go on low rations. But then this is them squeezing down areas they conquer, like 65% for Poles, 55% for the French, and you'll see right here 21%. Can't do it. Starve them to death. So, the Hunger Plan. So their plan was mass murder. But now what about these territories? If you're going to mobilize and squeeze resources, that is when the concentration camps would explode in numbers. So originally they're for political prisoners, and these are political prisoners. The upside down triangle, different colored ones would be like socialist, communist, whatever the party might be. A yellow star, David was Jewish, etc. Here, these are slave laborers from concentration camps in a bauxite mine for aluminum production. And they soon would imprison thousands of people, millions of people in areas they occupied, and brought them back. Remember I told you about them doing it in World War I, now take that by 1,000. And let's make it very clear, all of you would be gone. You're at the right age. You'd be worked to death. I'm probably too old. You'd be gone. So that's what they did. And so these slave labor camps in the concentration camp system, there'd be 1,000 concentration camps. And if you count the sub-camps or sub-concentration camps, over 3,000, all over German occupied areas. And there we have slave laborers under conditions we can't even comprehend, who the idea was to be worked to death. So here is a young boy. See the indicator, he's Jewish. Here are slave laborers, and they would work inside German cities alongside German workers, sometimes be household help. Here they are in factories. Remember I told you about how slaves would fight back when I talked about the South in the United States and they'd break stuff? Yeah, they would break stuff. German equipment in World War II was notorious for how unreliable, partially because Germans have a tendency to over-engineer, make it too complex. That's even better, to make sure there's not enough pieces in it, it's not connected right. Kind of ball bearings so the wheels don't turn. They risk their life to fight back. So I hear people today, which infuriates me, saying they didn't fight back. They fought back all the time. People fought back. You have to pick the way you can do it. So when you see pictures, and they'll say a term that wasn't used to the 1960s called the Holocaust, and they'll show concentration. It's not quite the same thing. These are these horrific slave labor camps and political camps. Brutal beyond our comprehension. Over 1 million would die in those camps, but it's not the same. So what about everybody else? That is Auschwitz. Auschwitz was a concentration camp. It's a whole archipelago of different camps. They originally was set up in a Polish army base. So these big brick buildings, those were army barracks. And they turned into a concentration camp / slave labor camps. And a whole bunch of slave labor camps all over. A bunch of German corporations built backwards. All around. So there's all these railroads coming there. I think you might already guess what that means. And so, people fight back. There's big ways and little ways to fight back. Remember I told you about Arbeit macht free, work makes you free? You can see a little way to fight back. They fought back. That sign was put up by concentration camp victims. See what they did? Look at the letters. You catch it? they welded the B upside down. As just a little slap in the face. We're not going to spell it. Little things matter. It's a way to fight back. Do you see it? If you get a chance, Auschwitz is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Now, this is the concentration camp. But since it's permanent buildings, they have the museums for also the death camp called Birkenau. So, what about the areas they conquered? In Poland and in areas of the Soviet Union, the first thing that happened for this Jewish population, remember this enemy within, according to Nazi ideology. This goes back to a medieval term of segregated areas of medieval towns they called ghettos. And in the areas, they'd be literally walled in and given starvation rations or purposely starved to them to work and be isolated there to die, to be starved to death. So we're talking a couple hundred calories. And then we'd be reduced to 100 calories a day. And this is in every major town. And so farmers who were Jewish would be at gunpoint forced to these areas. And the idea was if you follow the rules, you'll survive, which of course is a cruel joke. And so this is a couple shots from the ghetto and building the walls that surrounded them. And so no Jews past this point for both. The guards in these camps who would do most of the discipline were Jewish, called soldier commandos. And they were given a little bit better rations with the idea they're thinking they made a deal with the devil, hoping it would save themselves and their family. It would not. So they would betray innocent people, hoping for a better life. And of course, the Germans are going to say. They'd just be the last ones who are going to be. Then what? Well, when it was clear that Nazi Germany was not going to win the quick victory they thought, it was more than this, but these are the major ones. Beating Nazis, especially this guy right here, Reinhard Heydrich, are going to meet in this resort outside of Berlin. You can still go there, called Wannsee. This big, huge resort. It's a spa. It's in a park outside of Berlin. It's actually kind of beautiful. One thing I do like, the Soviets built about a 5 square mile memorial to their taking of Berlin. It's kind of spectacular. And they made sure they took it right in the shadow of that. So everyone knew what the Soviets did. We liberated it. Back to this. And there, they laid out a solution to what they call the Jewish question. And thus, the final solution. Now, they were already doing this to a lesser degree, but it's going to become industrialized and synthesized. These are people being rounded up in the ghetto. These are actually people being forced through the ghetto. But you have all this area they conquered. Now, there's 2 different areas. They have the area of Poland in here that Germany had, and then this area that they conquered after Barbarossa began. So there's 2 different things that are going to happen. The first one, following the invasion into Poland and the Soviet Union, especially during, I jumped the gun. I forgot to explain the rest. I'm sorry. My mind got going. Oops, so we know the war is going badly. So let's review. And remember, you can't have an enemy with him. If the war is going to go badly, can you have a group of people that you have blamed for every problem alive in your rear that someday might betray you? And then Hitler's rhetoric changed dramatically. It went from a war of conquest in Greater Germany and defeating Bolshevism to stop a Jewish conspiracy that only Germany could do. So Germany's not fighting this war for Germany. They're fighting it to save the world from a vast Jewish conspiracy. That's shocking how many people believed before this, during this, and still believe today. It's kind of shocking how much anti-Semitism is still around. It just blows me away. I can't help it. Especially since I have family members. It offends me. So, Einsatzgruppen. These were specially trained SS soldiers that followed the army. Now, the German army did help. And they were going to get rid of undesirables. Now, who are the undesirables? Well, the big ones were, of course, political leaders. When they invaded the Soviet Union, any Soviet leader or communist leader they called a commissar, shot immediately. Also other people like city government, and then one of the biggie, teachers. Teachers, because remember I showed you pictures of the Hitler Youth the other day? Hitler teachers indoctrinate. I'm indoctrinating you. But they teach. It's a way to erase what they are. And so those who survived the hunger plan could be good little slave laborers. Then also Jews. At first, it was more just grabbing some mass murder to terrify others. But by August, it started getting more systematic. This is in Lithuania. Hastily dug trench by Jewish prisoners and then one by one lined up. Nieces and nephews, relatives, those who remained in Europe were all killed. All. So, but then after the Wannsee, the Einsatzgruppe would expand to be responsible for mass murder in all the Soviet territory. You start seeing it in August of 41, but especially by January. Roving gangs would look for people who are Jewish or other undesirables to execute. And then where there were ghettos, they would be taken out, marched out, and shot. I cut off part of that picture. And it is unbelievable how many people would be shot. Now, I should add, Himmler, the head of the SS, did say we need a better strategy because this was so hard on the people killing them. No matter how drunk they got, when they would kill 2,000 or 3,000 in an hour, they couldn't handle it. I can't wrap my mind around the mass murder. Here are people being marched out from a Ukrainian city. You know what's happening there. And one by one shot. Now, we have a pretty good idea how many people were shot by these groups. Because Germans kept very good records, not only because they're Germans. Hey, that's how you get promotion. I killed this many, promoted. Over 2.5 million people are shot. Just mind-boggling. One by one shot. Just by the Einsatzgruppe. And that's probably undercounting other areas. Another mass murder. But we're not done. What about the areas that Germany had conquered before? That's where they would set up the death camps. So when we think of concentration camps, I don't blame you, I do it too, we think of death camps. There's only a few of them. Then the Germans tried to destroy the evidence after the fact. So all the Jews in Western Poland that were sent to ghettos, they were taken out of places like Moscow, told they're going to be saved, bring one bag, and we're going to go to a place where you can be isolated and saved, and took this train network to various concentration camps. Balzig, Sobibor, Majdanek, and Treblinka were all set up to kill over 2 million Polish Jews. And then they destroyed it. At Treblinka, there was a rebellion, they tried to fight back. At Sobibor, rebellion were 1,000 escaped. They fought back. But talking about it's the power that's hard to comprehend. And then they used the rail network all through Europe, and think of the resources they wasted in total war to murder people. They've cut off their oil supply. They're running out of resources. They're fighting for their life, and they still use so many resources to murder millions. It's beyond belief. To take to one other place. Near Auschwitz, they set up a death camp. Let me show you 2 pictures. That's in Majdanek. And even though they destroyed it, the tunnel to the showers where they gas people, it's gas on Cyclone B. They pull that off so you can kind of go underneath this and into there. Most of the pictures did not work. This is Soviet picture taken of the crematorium after they were murdered. That's Auschwitz. Auschwitz, in part of that archipelago, the death camp at Birkenau. And here you can see the station here, and people who could still be used to work in the camp as slave laborers or to. Thank you. Oh, she's not, but she's in class. Yeah, no biggie. Those who could work and those who couldn't work, take it right. They told showers, but they all you can see. And lined up and killed. Here they're doing this. They're doing this a lot. They destroyed most of Birkenwald before the Soviets arrived. And so there were a few people liberated at Birkenwald that were at the camp. They were the Soder commandos, but most of the people there had already been killed. And that's what it looks like when I went. And so that's still there. Almost all the barracks that are removed, but they built a couple so you can go into them. And the gates held them up with cement because they're electrified, so the gates are still there. And some of the, so here I'm there taking a picture down, and here looking back. By the way, this was a group of Israeli Jews. They take Israeli Jews when they're 12, 13 years old on a trip to Auschwitz for involvement. And so I was there, they're all wearing white shirts and they're young, you know. It's really interesting. I mean, I get it. They're kids, some are still little kids. So you got some are like playing with these kids. And other ones were crying and just overwhelmed. It's just one of them. It's really interesting. I talked to a few. It was really something. My niece went on them. So that's the liberation of Auschwitz, the concentration camp, by the Soviets. But the death camp was already basically destroyed. This is some of the things that the Soviets found. They kept all the glasses, for example, all the teeth, skin that the Germans thought they could use. So that is in the museum at the concentration camp. Here are all the artificial limbs. Yeah. I went over that in class, so you have to go back. Or to ask me real quick after class, but I went over it in great detail. So, in the 1960s, it's been called the Holocaust. But I will tell you, if you come and ask me, I will tell you. The Holocaust, that's when you start hearing that term. It was not called this before. After the war, nobody wanted to acknowledge this. There was a lot of, especially the survivors of this, and they're being told, we went through our own problems. We don't want to hear about it. A lot of it was very successful propaganda for the new country of Israel. And that's what the barracks look like today. And that's the remnants of the gas chambers when they tried to destroy it. But you can, I really recommend it, and it's kind of surreal because you're driving through some of those beautiful countries you can imagine on your way to a death camp. It's surreal. I've seen a lot of these. I've been to concentration camps. I've been to death camps. I know almost too much. So that's the way it looked like. Last couple things in class right now. That's your Germany economy. And they still had all this area here, even after the Battle of Moscow. And so in 1942, Hitler decided on a much more limited offensive because he realized the big ones had failed. And it's going to be in the South to get the oil because he knew it's going to be a long war of attrition, so he needed that oil. So using their reserves, everything. And this would be known as the last blitzkrieg. The Soviets are learning, but they busted through. And the plan was to take a city on the Volga River that Stalin helped take during the Civil War. It was called Tsarvin after the Tsar, and they changed it to Stalingrad. Now it's Volgograd. And protect the flank. The Volga River is almost a mile wide. It's a huge river. And then get going. But it's going so well, they split their forces. They're trying to get both. And the Soviets decided, Stalin ordered that Stalingrad is going to be held. And the Germans are going to take 90% of it. In some of the worst fighting, they'll call it another Verdun. But the Soviets will defend every building, every stairwell. Some of the hardest fighting in the world will be on the stairs. You can defend stairs. Every sewer, every square inch, and bled the Germans dry. And then when winter hit, here are the Germans trying to attack. When winter hit, the Soviets counterattacked, surrounded the Germans. This is my very quick Stalingrad. And then inflicting over 400,000 casualties, over 150,000 are going to be captured. And this will be the second turning point of the war. Here are the line of German POWs. Now the Germans can be beaten. 70% of the casualties of the German army in World War II will be inflicted by the Soviet army. They broke the back of the German army. An important thing to know, this is before any large numbers of Americans entered the war at all. Our history will be decided there. That's a German commander surrendering. And this is my very quick version. I should have, remember I told you how bad the Germans mistreated Soviet POWs? These guys would not be released, but be about 10% who survived. So 1953. Stalingrad. Okay, so let's get to America. I went so fast, and I went longer than I hoped I could, and I skipped so much. I still have to skip things. You know, I got to pick and choose. There's so much. It's an amazing story. Good. I get it.
I don't know.
I get it. Okay, everybody. See you. It's tomorrow. You have a reading started. I'll give you a little more reading. I'll tell you more later. But they blame a massive huge conspiracy for everything.
I was gone on Monday, so I think that's what I.
Yeah, I went over a lot. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.